Power is something people often misunderstand. Many think it belongs only to politicians, CEOs, celebrities, or those born into privilege. But real power operates quietly beneath everyday interactions, shaping conversations, relationships, decisions, and even the way people perceive us. It influences who gets heard, who gets ignored, who leads, and who follows. You can feel it in a meeting when one person speaks and everyone listens, while another struggles to hold attention. You notice it in social settings where certain individuals naturally command respect without raising their voice. Power is not always loud, aggressive, or obvious. In fact, the most effective forms of power are subtle, psychological, and deeply rooted in human behavior. At its core, power is the ability to influence outcomes and shape perceptions without forcing control. It is not about domination for the sake of ego, but about understanding human nature well enough to guide situations in your favor. People who grasp this truth realize that influence begins in the mind, both their own and others. They recognize that every interaction is shaped by invisible forces like perception, emotion, status, and trust. When you understand these forces, you begin to see that power is less about external authority and more about internal mastery. One of the most fundamental psychological realities is that perception often matters more than truth. People rarely respond to reality as it is, they respond to how reality appears to them. This is why two individuals can say the same words and receive completely different reactions. One may be perceived as confident and competent, while the other seems unsure or unconvincing. The difference lies not just in what is said, but in presence, tone, body language, and emotional control. When someone appears certain, others feel safer trusting them. When someone appears calm under pressure, they are seen as capable. Power begins when you consciously shape how others experience you. This does not mean pretending to be someone you are not. Forced behavior is easy to detect and often creates distrust. Instead, it involves strengthening qualities that naturally inspire confidence in others. Emotional steadiness, thoughtful speech, patience, and self-control signal maturity and reliability. People are drawn toward those who make them feel secure and understood. When you manage your emotional reactions and remain composed, especially in tense moments, you subtly position yourself as someone who can handle responsibility. Over time, this perception becomes your quiet authority. Another deep psychological truth is that people constantly assess social value. This evaluation happens almost instantly and largely without conscious thought. Humans are wired to notice signals of status, competence, and confidence because these cues historically helped determine who could lead and who could provide safety. In modern life, these signals appear through posture, voice clarity, decisiveness, grooming, and the way someone occupies space. Even small behaviors communicate whether a person respects themselves. When you value your own time, speak with intention, and avoid seeking approval, others instinctively sense higher social worth. Seeking validation weakens influence because it transfers control of your confidence to others. When someone constantly tries to please, agree, or gain acceptance, they unintentionally signal insecurity. Power grows when you are comfortable with disagreement and do not fear disapproval. This does not mean becoming arrogant or dismissive. It means expressing your thoughts calmly without emotional dependence on how others respond. People respect those who stand firm with quiet confidence far more than those who bend under social pressure. At the same time, true influence is never built on intimidation alone. Fear may create temporary compliance, but it rarely earns lasting loyalty. Psychological power becomes sustainable when it balances strength with understanding. People are more likely to trust and follow those who acknowledge their perspectives and make them feel valued. When someone feels heard, they lower their defenses. They become more open to ideas and more willing to cooperate. This emotional connection creates a form of influence that force cannot achieve. Listening carefully is therefore a surprisingly powerful skill. Most people listen only to reply, not to understand. When you genuinely pay attention, you notice emotions beneath words, unspoken concerns, and subtle motivations. This awareness allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. People feel respected when they sense authentic attention, and respect naturally increases your influence. In many situations, the person who listens is difficult to obtain. This principle affects not only material objects but also time, attention, and availability. When someone is constantly accessible and eager to please, their presence becomes ordinary. But when they are selective with commitments and protective of their time, their attention feels more meaningful. Scarcity creates a sense of importance. It signals that your energy is valuable and not given away casually. This does not require playing manipulative games. It simply means setting healthy boundaries and understanding that overexposure reduces perceived value. When you respect your own limits, others learn to respect them too. You become someone whose presence carries weight rather than noise. Strategic absence can sometimes speak louder than constant visibility, allowing your contributions to feel intentional rather than routine. Emotional control forms another pillar of psychological strength. Strong emotions are natural, but uncontrolled reactions can weaken influence. Anger, desperation, or visible frustration signal vulnerability in competitive or high-stakes environments. When others see that your emotional state is easily disturbed, they may question your reliability under pressure. Remaining composed does not mean suppressing feelings, it means choosing measured responses instead of impulsive reactions. Calmness suggests inner stability, and stability inspires trust. Silence can also be a powerful tool. Many people rush to fill quiet moments because silence feels uncomfortable. Yet silence often encourages others to reveal more information, rethink their statements, or feel the weight of their own words. A calm pause can shift the emotional tone of a conversation and create space for reflection. It signals confidence and patience, showing that you do not need constant noise to maintain control. Those who are comfortable with silence often appear more thoughtful and authoritative. Power also depends on understanding motivation. Every person is driven by desires, fears, ambitions, and insecurities. When you recognize what matters most to someone, you communicate in ways that align with their priorities. This alignment makes persuasion feel natural rather than forced. People cooperate more easily when they feel their personal goals are acknowledged. Influence becomes smoother when it is framed around mutual benefit instead of personal gain alone. At a deeper level, psychological power grows from self-awareness. Without understanding your own strengths, weaknesses, emotional triggers, and behavioral patterns, it is difficult to manage how others experience you. Self-awareness allows you to recognize when ego interferes with judgment, when insecurity drives overcompensation, or when fear prevents necessary action. By observing yourself honestly, you gain control over reactions that might otherwise undermine your presence. This inner clarity creates authenticity, and authenticity strengthens trust. People are highly sensitive to inconsistency between words and behavior. When your actions align with your values, others perceive integrity. Integrity reduces suspicion and builds credibility, making influence more natural and long-lasting. Pretending to be powerful often fails, but becoming internally grounded creates a presence that requires no performance. As these psychological patterns begin to connect, a deeper realization emerges. Power is not a single skill but a combination of emotional intelligence, social awareness, self-control, and intentional behavior. It is expressed through subtle signals that shape how others feel around you. Those who master these signals rarely need to demand respect because it is freely given. Yet understanding these principles is only the beginning. Applying them in complex real-world situations requires careful judgment, especially when influence intersects with competition, leadership, and hidden social dynamics. The next layer reveals how strategic behavior, timing, and unspoken rules quietly determine who truly holds control when stakes become higher. There is a quiet moment in every competitive environment when outcomes are decided long before any visible action takes place. It happens in the way people position themselves socially, how they manage timing, and how carefully they choose when to speak or remain silent. Power rarely belongs to the loudest person in the room. More often, it rests with the individual who understands the invisible currents moving beneath the surface of every interaction. These currents are shaped by unspoken hierarchies, emotional undercurrents, and subtle negotiations of status. When you begin to notice them, you realize that influence is less about force and more about positioning. Positioning is the art of placing yourself where you understand how to be seen in the right context. Human psychology tends to associate visibility with value. When people repeatedly see someone contributing meaningfully, they begin to attach competence to that presence. Over time, familiarity turns into credibility. This is why consistent exposure in meaningful situations quietly strengthens authority. But positioning is not just about being seen. It is about being seen in the right light. If visibility comes from constant self-promotion, people may sense insecurity rather than strength. True influence grows when recognition comes naturally as a byproduct of valuable actions. When your work speaks before you do, people form impressions that feel self-discovered rather than imposed. This distinction matters because individuals trust conclusions they reach on their own far more than opinions forced upon them. Timing adds another powerful layer to influence. Saying the right thing at the wrong moment weakens impact, while speaking at the perfect moment can shift entire conversations. Skilled communicators sense emotional temperature before they contribute. They notice whether people are defensive, open, distracted, or engaged. Instead of pushing their agenda immediately, they wait for receptivity. This patience often gives their words greater weight. A well-timed statement can feel like clarity emerging naturally, rather than an argument trying to dominate. There is also power in restraint. The urge to react instantly is often emotional rather than strategic. When someone provokes you, immediate responses usually serve ego more than outcome. Pausing creates space for judgment. It allows emotions to settle and prevents others from predicting your behavior. Predictability reduces leverage because people can prepare for expected reactions. But when your responses are measured and deliberate, others become more cautious. They recognize that your actions come from intention, not impulse. In many situations, less expression creates more mystery, and mystery holds psychological weight. Humans are naturally curious about what they cannot fully read. When every thought and emotion is openly displayed, there is little left to interpret. But when you reveal yourself gradually and selectively, people pay closer attention. They observe more carefully, trying to understand your perspective. This attention itself becomes a form of influence because it draws mental focus toward you. Emotional neutrality can be especially powerful during conflict. When one person becomes visibly frustrated while the other remains calm, observers instinctively gravitate toward the calmer presence. Composure suggests control, and control suggests strength. The emotionally reactive individual appears overwhelmed, while the steady one appears dependable. This perception can shift alliances without a single persuasive word being spoken. In tense environments, calmness functions like an anchor that stabilizes uncertainty. Another subtle force shaping influence is the principle of non-neediness. When someone appears desperate for approval, opportunities, or recognition, others sense pressure. Desperation often pushes people away because it creates emotional discomfort. On the other hand, those who seem self-sufficient attract interest. Independence signals strength and capability. It suggests that the person chooses relationships and opportunities rather than clinging to them. This perception increases perceived value because humans naturally respect what does not beg to be accepted. Detachment, however, should not be confused with coldness. Influence deepens when warmth balances independence. A person who is distant may appear unapproachable, while someone overly eager may seem insecure. The ideal presence combines quiet confidence with genuine attentiveness. This balance makes others feel comfortable without sensing emotional pressure. They experience respect rather than manipulation, which strengthens trust over time. Social dynamics also revolve around alliances. Rarely does power operate in isolation. Individuals who build supportive networks strengthen their influence because cooperation multiplies resources, information, and opportunities. Trust-based relationships act as protective systems during uncertainty. When challenges arise, those with strong alliances recover faster because they are not navigating difficulties alone. People are more willing to support someone who has consistently shown reliability and discretion. Discretion itself is a powerful psychological asset. Those who speak carelessly about private matters often lose trust quickly. Confidentiality signals maturity and self-control. When people feel safe sharing information with you, they unconsciously grant you influence. This trust creates quiet authority. Reputation grows from patterns, not isolated actions. A single impressive moment may attract attention, but consistent behavior builds lasting credibility. Humans rely on patterns to predict reliability. When your actions repeatedly align with integrity, patience, and competence, people begin to anticipate steadiness from you. This expectation reduces resistance because others feel secure in your presence. Reliability transforms influence from temporary persuasion into enduring respect. Adaptability further strengthens this presence. Every social environment has its own emotional tone and expectations. Those who rigidly behave the same way everywhere may struggle to connect. Adaptable individuals sense atmosphere and adjust communication style without compromising authenticity. They know when to be assertive and when to be gentle, when to lead and when to observe. This flexibility allows smoother interactions and reduces unnecessary friction. The ability to read emotional cues plays a major role here. Micro-expressions, tone shifts, and body language often reveal more than words. When you notice hesitation, discomfort, or enthusiasm, you gain insight into unspoken thoughts. Responding to these subtle signals builds deeper connection. People feel understood even when they cannot explain why. This emotional intelligence strengthens persuasion because it aligns communication with real feelings rather than surface statements. As influence grows, responsibility becomes unavoidable. Power without ethical grounding often leads to manipulation that eventually damages credibility. Short-term advantages gained through deception tend to create long-term distrust. Sustainable influence depends on aligning strategy with integrity. When people believe your intentions are fair, they cooperate more willingly. Trust reduces resistance and transforms influence into collaboration rather than control. Gradually, a deeper pattern becomes visible. Power is not seized in dramatic gestures but accumulated through small, consistent behaviors. Calm responses, thoughtful timing, emotional balance, selective visibility, and respectful communication quietly shape how others perceive you. These impressions influence decisions long before formal authority is recognized. By the time leadership titles appear, true influence has often already been established informally. Yet social environments are rarely stable. Competition, ambition, and hidden insecurities constantly reshape relationships. As stakes increase, subtle rivalries emerge and intentions become less transparent. Navigating these situations requires sharper awareness of manipulation, persuasion tactics, and defensive strategies that protect your position without creating unnecessary conflict. Understanding these deeper psychological games reveals how influence is maintained when trust is tested and pressure intensifies. There comes a point where influence is no longer just about presence, composure, or social awareness. The environment becomes more competitive, people become more guarded, and intentions are not always expressed openly. In such situations, power begins to operate like a quiet psychological game. Words carry layered meanings, actions serve hidden motives, and trust becomes selective. To move effectively in these spaces, a person must learn to recognize the difference between surface behavior and underlying intention. What people say is often less important than why they say it and what they hope to gain. Human behavior is deeply shaped by self-interest, even when it appears generous or cooperative. This does not mean people are inherently selfish in a negative sense, but rather that most decisions are influenced by personal desires, fears, and ambitions. Some seek recognition, others security, others control, and many simply want to avoid loss or embarrassment. When you begin to observe interactions through this lens, confusion decreases. Actions that once seemed unpredictable start to make sense. You stop taking behavior personally and start analyzing it strategically. One of the most important psychological skills in competitive environments is emotional detachment. When emotions dominate perception, judgment becomes distorted. Anger exaggerates threats, insecurity imagines rejection, and excitement hides risks. Emotional reactions can be used by others as tools of manipulation. A person who knows how to provoke fear or frustration can influence decisions without offering logical arguments. But when you maintain emotional distance, you see situations more clearly. You respond based on long-term benefit rather than temporary feeling. Detachment does not remove empathy. Instead, it creates balance between understanding emotions and being controlled by them. This balance, who remains composed can observe more, think clearly, and choose responses carefully. Meanwhile, emotionally overwhelmed individuals often reveal their intentions unintentionally, exposing weaknesses they intended to hide. Observation becomes sharper when you focus on patterns rather than isolated events. Anyone can behave kindly once or act confidently for a short time, but repeated behavior reveals true priorities. Someone who consistently avoids responsibility may offer impressive excuses, yet the pattern exposes unreliability. Another who repeatedly supports others without seeking attention demonstrates quiet leadership. Patterns reveal character, and recognizing character allows better strategic decisions about trust and collaboration. Trust should be given gradually, not instantly. Quick trust often comes from emotional excitement or the desire for connection. But influence requires stability, and stability grows from tested reliability. When trust is built slowly through consistent experience, it becomes stronger and less vulnerable to disappointment. Careful trust protects you from manipulation while still allowing meaningful alliances. It prevents emotional dependency on people whose intentions are unclear. Communication also changes in competitive spaces. Direct statements may create resistance, especially when people feel their authority or competence is threatened. Indirect persuasion often proves more effective. Instead of confronting beliefs aggressively, skilled communicators plant ideas gently. They ask thoughtful questions that encourage others to reach conclusions on their own. This method reduces defensiveness because people feel they are choosing rather than being forced. Influence becomes smoother when it feels like collaboration instead of control. Silence again proves powerful in such moments. When you do not reveal your full position immediately, others fill the gap with information. They explain more than they intended, clarify hidden concerns, and sometimes contradict themselves. Silence creates psychological space that encourages disclosure. It also prevents you from committing too early before understanding the complete situation. Strategic patience often reveals opportunities invisible to those who rush. Another psychological reality emerges in how people handle credit and recognition. Publicly challenging others or taking recognition aggressively can create silent resentment. Even if success is deserved, people resist feeling overshadowed. Smart influence allows others to feel valued while still advancing objectives. When people believe their contributions are acknowledged, they cooperate more willingly. Shared victories build loyalty, while stolen credit builds quiet opposition. Ego management therefore becomes essential. Ego seeks validation, superiority, and constant acknowledgement. But visible ego often weakens influence by creating distance. People feel judged or diminished in its presence. Humility, when genuine, creates approachability and trust. It allows conversations without defensive barriers. Those who balance confidence with modesty often gain deeper respect than those who constantly display dominance. Conflict management reveals another layer of psychological power. Direct confrontation may seem strong, but it often escalates resistance. Many disputes are fueled not by real disagreement but by wounded pride. When pride feels attacked, compromise becomes difficult. Addressing issues calmly and privately reduces the need for defensive posturing. It preserves dignity while resolving problems more effectively. Quiet solutions often achieve more than public battles. Reputation protection also becomes increasingly important as influence grows. The more visible a person becomes, the more their actions are observed and interpreted. Small mistakes may be exaggerated, and misunderstandings can spread quickly. Consistent integrity acts as protection against false accusations. When your history reflects fairness and reliability, people hesitate to believe negative claims. A strong reputation functions like social armor, reducing damage from rumors or manipulation. Adaptation remains necessary as circumstances evolve. Strategies that work in one environment may fail in another. Social groups differ in values, communication styles, and expectations of leadership. Those who cling rigidly to one approach may lose relevance. Flexible individuals observe cultural cues and adjust behavior accordingly while maintaining core principles. This adaptability allows influence to remain effective across diverse situations. At the same time, boundaries protect psychological strength. Without limits, influence turns into exhaustion. Constant availability, overcommitment, and emotional overinvestment reduce effective exploitation by those who mistake kindness for weakness. Gradually, it becomes clear that power is not about controlling people but understanding them deeply enough to guide interactions wisely. It involves recognizing motivations, managing emotions, observing patterns, and communicating strategically. These skills create influence that feels natural rather than forced. Others cooperate not because they are pressured but because the interaction aligns with their own interests and emotional comfort. As social dynamics grow more complex, challenges intensify. Hidden rivalries, subtle manipulation, and shifting alliances test emotional intelligence and strategic patience. Maintaining influence in such environments requires mastering persuasion at a deeper level, recognizing deception quickly, and protecting mental resilience under sustained pressure. The next stage explores how psychological strength is preserved when environments become unpredictable and trust becomes fragile. Pressure has a way of revealing what comfort often hides. When circumstances become unstable and outcomes uncertain, human behavior shifts noticeably. Patience becomes shorter, emotions surface faster, and decision-making grows more impulsive. It is during these moments that psychological strength becomes truly visible. Some individuals lose clarity and react to events as they unfold, while others maintain steadiness and quietly shape the direction of those events. The difference rarely lies in intelligence alone. It lies in mental resilience, emotional regulation, and the ability to remain centered when external situations feel chaotic. Uncertainty creates psychological discomfort because the human mind prefers predictability. When people cannot foresee outcomes, they instinctively seek control. This desire for certainty often leads to rushed decisions, forced conclusions, and unnecessary conflict. Individuals who recognize this tendency gain an advantage. Instead of reacting to discomfort, they accept uncertainty as a natural part of complex environments. Acceptance reduces panic, and reduced panic allows clearer thinking. A calm mind evaluates options more effectively than a stressed one searching desperately for immediate relief. Mental resilience develops from perspective. When challenges are viewed as temporary situations rather than permanent threats, emotional intensity decreases. Setbacks feel lighter when seen as part of a longer journey instead of personal failures. This perspective allows recovery without self-doubt dominating thoughts. Resilient individuals do not ignore difficulties, they simply avoid exaggerating their significance. They conserve emotional energy for problem-solving rather than draining it through worry. Emotional regulation plays an equally important role. Strong emotions are not weaknesses, but uncontrolled emotions can cloud judgment. Fear may prevent necessary risks, anger may damage valuable relationships, and anxiety may create hesitation where confidence is required. Those who manage emotional responses do not suppress feelings, they understand them without becoming overwhelmed. They allow emotions to inform decisions without allowing emotions to dominate decisions. One subtle psychological skill involves separating ego from outcome. Ego becomes attached to being right, being recognized, and avoiding embarrassment. When ego dominates, decisions prioritize pride over progress. Admitting mistakes feels threatening, and constructive feedback feels insulting. But when ego loosens its grip, learning accelerates. Mistakes become information rather than humiliation. Feedback becomes guidance rather than attack. This shift strengthens both competence and relationships, making influence more stable. Another powerful trait under pressure is deliberate patience. Many people confuse patience with passivity, but they are fundamentally different. Passivity avoids action out of fear or laziness, while patience chooses the right moment for action. Strategic waiting allows situations to develop fully before intervention. It prevents unnecessary conflict and reduces wasted effort. Acting too early can create resistance, while acting at the right moment often feels natural and effective. This patience becomes especially valuable in environments filled with hidden agendas. Not everyone expresses intentions openly, and premature reactions may expose your strategy while revealing little about others. Careful observation allows more information to surface. Behavioral inconsistencies, emotional reactions, and communication patterns gradually expose underlying motives. Time often reveals what urgency tries to conceal. Psychological endurance also depends on managing mental focus. Under stress, attention easily shifts toward negative. Redirect focus toward actionable steps. Instead of dwelling on what cannot be controlled, they invest energy in what can be influenced. This shift restores a sense of agency and reduces emotional paralysis. Social pressure intensifies these challenges. Opinions, criticism, and expectations from others can distort judgment if internal stability is weak. Many decisions are influenced not by logic but by fear of social disapproval. The desire to be accepted may lead individuals to compromise values or pursue paths misaligned with their long-term goals. Inner clarity acts as protection against this influence. When personal principles are well defined, external noise loses power. Confidence rooted in preparation further strengthens resilience. Uncertainty feels more threatening when individuals doubt their own readiness. Preparation builds quiet assurance that challenges can be handled competently. This confidence does not eliminate difficulty, but it reduces fear-driven hesitation. Those who trust their preparation respond with greater composure and adapt more effectively when plans must change. Adaptability itself becomes a survival skill in unpredictable environments. Rigid thinking struggles when reality shifts unexpectedly. Flexible thinking adjusts strategies without losing direction. Instead of resisting change, adaptable individuals analyze new conditions and modify their approach. This flexibility prevents frustration and allows continuous progress despite obstacles. Equally important is the management of psychological energy. Constant exposure to stress without recovery leads to emotional exhaustion. Exhaustion reduces patience, weakens judgment, and increases irritability. Those who maintain influence understand the necessity of mental recovery. Quiet reflection, temporary withdrawal from conflict, and restorative routines protect clarity. Sustained effectiveness requires balancing effort with renewal. In tense situations, communication must remain measured. Emotional intensity often encourages harsh words or defensive tones that escalate conflict. Calm communication reduces misunderstanding and preserves respect even during disagreement. When language remains steady, conversations focus on solutions rather than personal attacks. Respectful expression allows influence to continue even when opinions differ strongly. Another subtle strength lies in accepting limited control. Not every outcome can be shaped directly, and attempting to control everything creates frustration. Recognizing limits allows energy to be invested wisely. It prevents wasted effort on unchangeable circumstances and encourages creative thinking within realistic boundaries. Acceptance of limits paradoxically increases effectiveness by focusing attention where influence is possible. Over time, these psychological habits create a presence that remains steady regardless of external turbulence. Others begin to associate this steadiness with reliability and leadership. In moments of confusion, people naturally look toward those who appear composed. Calmness becomes contagious, stabilizing group dynamics and reducing collective anxiety. Influence grows not through dramatic gestures but through consistent emotional balance. Eventually, a deeper realization emerges. Power is sustained not by constant assertion but by controlled restraint, thoughtful action, and emotional endurance. Psychological strength allows influence to persist through uncertainty, conflict, and change. While others exhaust themselves reacting to every disturbance, resilient individuals conserve energy and act with intention. Yet resilience alone is not enough when environments grow increasingly complex and competitive. Influence must also be protected from subtle manipulation, hidden opposition, and shifting loyalties. Understanding how to defend psychological ground without becoming defensive requires an even deeper awareness of persuasion, perception, and strategic positioning in high-stakes social landscapes. There is a quiet shift that happens when a person moves from simply handling pressure to understanding the deeper currents of influence that shape every environment. At this stage, power is no longer about reacting wisely or staying calm under stress. It becomes about seeing the invisible architecture behind human behavior. Every social space, whether professional or personal, is structured by perception, incentives, fears, and unspoken hierarchies. Those who recognize this structure begin to move with greater precision. They do not push blindly against resistance. Instead, they align themselves with psychological forces that are already in motion. Perception becomes one of the most decisive elements in shaping outcomes. People rarely evaluate situations with perfect objectivity and more on shaping how reality is interpreted. A proposal framed as an opportunity feels different from the same proposal framed as a risk. A challenge presented as growth feels different from one presented as threat. Subtle framing guides emotional response, and emotional response often determines decisions long before logic is fully considered. Skilled communicators understand that people protect their self-image carefully. Direct contradiction can feel like a personal attack, even when intentions are constructive. When individuals feel their competence or status is questioned, they become defensive and resistant. A wiser approach preserves dignity while guiding perspective. Suggestions framed with respect allow others to reconsider positions without feeling defeated. When pride remains intact, cooperation becomes easier. Social influence also depends heavily on emotional contagion. Moods spread quietly through tone, facial expression, and body language. One person's anxiety can unsettle an entire group, while one person's calm confidence can stabilize collective emotion. This emotional transmission happens automatically, without conscious awareness. Those who manage their emotional signals therefore influence environments even without speaking. A steady presence reduces tension, encourages rational thinking, and builds trust naturally. Status dynamics further shape interactions. In every group, whether formal or informal, individuals unconsciously assess relative standing. Signals of confidence, expertise, and composure elevate perceived status, while insecurity and excessive approval, seeking lower it. Importantly, status is not fixed, it shifts based on behavior and context. Speaking with clarity, maintaining composed posture, and demonstrating thoughtful decision-making subtly reinforce authority. Over time, these signals accumulate, strengthening influence without explicit claims of superiority. However, openly seeking status often produces the opposite effect. When individuals try too hard to appear important, others sense the effort and question authenticity. True authority feels natural rather than forced. It comes from consistent behavior aligned with capability. When recognition appears earned rather than demanded, respect grows more easily. Quiet competence speaks louder than loud self-promotion. Another powerful dimension of influence lies in controlling attention. Attention is a limited psychological resource, and whatever captures it shapes perception. When focus is scattered across too many details, clarity weakens. Influential individuals guide attention deliberately, highlighting key points while minimizing distractions. By emphasizing what truly matters, they help others process information more easily. This guidance reduces confusion and positions them as reliable sources of clarity. Narrative framing becomes especially important in shaping attention. Humans understand the world through stories rather than isolated facts. A well-structured narrative connects events into meaningful patterns, making information easier to remember and accept. When situations are explained through coherent narratives, they feel understandable and purposeful. This sense of meaning increases emotional engagement and strengthens persuasion. Trust remains the foundation beneath all lasting influence. Without trust, persuasion feels manipulative and cooperation becomes fragile. Trust grows from consistency between words and actions. When promises are fulfilled reliably, credibility strengthens. Small acts of reliability accumulate over time, creating a reputation for dependability. Once trust solidifies, communication becomes smoother because intentions are no longer questioned constantly. At the same time, discernment protects against misplaced trust. Not every relationship operates with transparency. Some individuals conceal motives beneath charm or cooperation. Recognizing inconsistencies between words and behavior prevents vulnerability to manipulation. Careful observation reveals whether actions truly align with expressed intentions. Discernment allows openness without naivety. Influence also expands through strategic generosity. Offering help, sharing credit, and supporting others without immediate expectation creates goodwill. This goodwill often returns indirectly through loyalty and cooperation. Generosity signals abundance rather than insecurity. It shows confidence in one's own position and reduces competitive tension. When people feel supported rather than threatened, collaboration becomes more natural. Yet generosity must be balanced with boundaries. Excessive giving without limits can invite exploitation and reduce perceived value. Healthy boundaries protect time, energy, and focus. They signal self-aligned with underlying motivations. Each individual prioritizes different incentives, whether recognition, security, growth, or belonging. Messages that connect with these priorities feel personally relevant. When communication resonates with internal motivations, resistance decreases naturally. People cooperate more willingly when proposals align with their own interests. Over time, influence becomes less about individual techniques and more about integrated awareness. Emotional intelligence, perception management, strategic communication, and ethical grounding combine into a cohesive presence. This presence feels calm, confident, and trustworthy. Others respond positively not because they are pressured but because interaction feels constructive and respectful. Eventually, a profound understanding takes shape. Sustainable power is not about dominating conversations or controlling people directly. It is about guiding emotional climates, shaping perceptions responsibly, protecting trust, and aligning actions with long-term integrity. Influence that respects human psychology creates cooperation without force and leadership without intimidation. Still, even refined influence must evolve continuously. Social landscapes shift, new personalities emerge, and unexpected challenges test stability. To maintain lasting authority, one must understand how legacy, reputation, and long-term perception solidify influence beyond immediate interactions. The final layer explores how psychological power matures into enduring impact that continues shaping environments even in one's absence. Long after conversations end and immediate conflicts fade, something quieter continues to shape how a person is treated and remembered. That quiet force is reputation, the accumulated impression formed through countless small observations over time. Reputation works like a psychological shortcut in the minds of others. Instead of evaluating someone from the beginning in every new situation, people rely on prior impressions to predict future behavior. This prediction influences trust, opportunity, and cooperation before a single word is spoken. In this way, influence matures beyond active effort and becomes embedded in perception itself. Reputation is not built through dramatic gestures alone. Grand moments may attract attention briefly, but lasting impressions grow from consistent patterns of behavior. Reliability in small responsibilities, fairness in disagreements, and composure during stressful moments gradually shape how others interpret character. When actions repeatedly align with principles, people begin to expect steadiness. That expectation reduces hesitation in future collaborations because uncertainty has been replaced with familiarity. Familiarity, when positive, creates comfort. Humans naturally prefer predictable and stable relationships over uncertain ones. A person known for emotional balance and thoughtful judgment becomes someone others feel safe approaching. This sense of safety is powerful. It encourages open communication, honest feedback, and cooperative problem solving. Safety reduces defensiveness, allowing influence to operate smoothly without constant reassurance. Integrity strengthens this foundation further. When words consistently match actions, credibility grows naturally. Promises fulfilled without excuses signal responsibility. Honest communication, even when delivering unpleasant truths, builds respect. People may not always agree with difficult decisions, but they trust decisions more when intentions appear transparent. Integrity therefore acts as invisible support beneath influence, preventing collapse during moments of scrutiny. However, reputation remains fragile if neglected. A single careless action can create doubt that overshadows years of consistency. This fragility does not mean living in constant fear of mistakes, but it does encourage mindful behavior. Thoughtful individuals recognize that influence brings visibility, and visibility amplifies consequences. Careful communication, respectful disagreement, and responsible decision-making protect credibility from unnecessary damage. Social memory also favors emotional impact over factual detail. People may forget specific words spoken years ago, but they remember how interactions made them feel. A person who consistently creates feelings of respect, clarity, and fairness leaves positive emotional imprints. Conversely, repeated experiences of humiliation, dismissal, or unpredictability create emotional resistance. Emotional memory shapes future cooperation more strongly than logical recollection. Because of this, subtle courtesy becomes more influential than dramatic authority. Listening without interruption, acknowledging contributions, and offering calm response strengthens relational stability. Influence also extends through association. The people and environments connected to an individual shape perception indirectly. Consistent collaboration with reliable and ethical partners reinforces credibility. On the other hand, frequent association with dishonest or volatile individuals raises silent concerns. Humans instinctively evaluate networks as indicators of judgment and values. Choosing associations carefully therefore strengthens long-term perception. Legacy emerges when influence continues even in absence. A respected presence shapes group culture, decision-making habits, and communication standards long after direct involvement decreases. Others begin to adopt behavioral patterns they have repeatedly observed. Calm conflict resolution, ethical decision-making, and thoughtful communication gradually become shared norms. Influence transforms from personal effort into collective culture. This transition requires humility. Those obsessed with personal recognition often struggle to build lasting legacy because their focus remains on immediate credit. Lasting influence grows when contribution becomes more important than attention. Supporting systems, mentoring others, and encouraging shared ownership allow impact to extend beyond individual visibility. When success becomes collective rather than personal, influence multiplies quietly. Mentorship represents one of the most enduring forms of psychological impact. Guidance offered with patience and sincerity shapes how others think, decide, and lead. Lessons internalized through respectful mentorship continue spreading through future interactions. This ripple effect expands influence across time and context without direct effort. Teaching through example often proves more powerful than instruction through authority. Adaptation remains essential even at this mature stage. Social expectations evolve, and behavior that once inspired trust may lose relevance if environments change. Continuous self-reflection allows adjustment without compromising core principles. Those who remain open to learning maintain credibility across generations and shifting cultures. Adaptability ensures that reputation grows rather than becoming outdated. At the same time, detachment from constant validation preserves inner stability. When identity depends entirely on external praise, criticism becomes emotionally destabilizing. Balanced individuals accept recognition with gratitude but do not rely on it for self-worth. This independence allows consistent behavior regardless of fluctuating opinion. Stability reinforces trust because actions remain grounded rather than reactive. Another dimension of lasting influence involves restraint in the use of authority. Power displayed excessively often creates distance and silent resistance. Power used sparingly and thoughtfully builds respect. When authority is exercised only when necessary and with fairness, people perceive leadership as protective rather than controlling. This perception encourages voluntary cooperation rather than reluctant compliance. Forgiveness also strengthens long-term perception. Holding grudges creates emotional tension that disrupts collaboration. While accountability remains important, measured forgiveness shows emotional maturity. It signals prioritization of progress over resentment. Those capable of releasing minor offenses create environments where communication remains open and productive. Ultimately, influence matures into quiet presence rather than visible control. Others begin to value perspective, seek guidance willingly, and trust judgment without constant persuasion. Authority becomes a natural extension of character rather than a position that must be defended repeatedly. This quiet authority carries weight because it is supported by accumulated respect. As this stage unfolds, a final understanding becomes clear. True psychological power is not measured by how many people obey, but by how many people trust, respect, and remember. It is reflected in reputations that open doors silently, in relationships that endure difficulty, and in cultures shaped through consistent example. Influence that reaches this level no longer depends on constant effort because it has become part of how others perceive reality itself. And when influence becomes woven into perception, it achieves its most enduring form, a presence that continues guiding decisions, shaping environments, and inspiring trust long after the moment of direct interaction has passed. There is a final stage of psychological power that feels almost invisible, yet it is the most transformative of all. At this level, influence is no longer something a person tries to exercise. It becomes a natural extension of who, but out of trust developed over time. This kind of influence does not announce itself loudly. It operates through subtle signals of wisdom, emotional balance, and deep understanding of human nature. Such power begins with self-mastery. Without control over one's own impulses, fears, and ego, any external influence remains unstable. A person who is easily angered can be provoked. A person driven by insecurity can be manipulated through approval or criticism. A person attached strongly to recognition may compromise judgment to protect image. But when inner reactions are understood and regulated, external events lose their ability to disturb mental clarity. Self-mastery creates emotional independence, and emotional independence prevents others from quietly controlling behavior. This independence allows decisions to emerge from principles rather than pressure. Principles act like an internal compass during uncertain situations. When values are clearly defined, choices become more consistent and less influenced by temporary emotion or public opinion. Consistency strengthens credibility because people begin to recognize predictability in ethical standards. They may not always agree, but they understand what to expect. Predictable integrity builds trust faster than impressive but inconsistent behavior. Another dimension of mature influence lies in clarity of intention. People sense when actions carry hidden motives. Even subtle insincerity creates discomfort that weakens trust. But when intentions are straightforward and aligned with shared benefit, cooperation becomes natural. Transparency reduces suspicion, allowing energy to focus on progress rather than doubt. A person known for clean intentions rarely needs to defend their decisions repeatedly. At this stage, communication becomes simpler yet more impactful. There is less need for dramatic language or persuasive pressure. Calm, clear expression carries authority because it reflects internal certainty. When someone speaks without emotional agitation or excessive explanation, listeners sense confidence in the message. This steadiness encourages attention and reduces resistance. Words delivered with composure often influence more deeply than arguments delivered with intensity. Equally important is the ability to empower others. Insecure leaders often hoard control, fearing loss of relevance. But those grounded in self-worth understand that shared strength multiplies collective success. Encouraging others to contribute ideas, develop skills, and take responsibility builds environments of trust and collaboration. Empowerment transforms influence from control into guidance. People become willing participants rather than reluctant followers. This approach creates psychological safety, a condition where individuals feel comfortable expressing ideas without fear of humiliation. In safe environments, creativity and honest communication increase. Problems are addressed early rather than hidden. Mutual respect replaces silent tension. Psychological safety strengthens group resilience and fosters loyalty that cannot be demanded through authority alone. Mature influence also involves selective engagement. Not every conflict deserves attention, and not every criticism requires response. Constant reaction drains emotional energy and reduces focus on meaningful priorities. Wise individuals choose battles carefully, addressing issues aligned with long-term values while ignoring distractions driven by ego or provocation. This restraint preserves mental clarity and prevents unnecessary escalation. Time perspective further deepens this wisdom. Short-term victories often create long-term complications when achieved through aggression or manipulation. But decisions guided by long-term vision prioritize sustainable relationships and consistent credibility. Patience allows opportunities to develop naturally without forcing outcomes prematurely. Over time, steady progress outperforms impulsive success built on unstable foundations. Gratitude and humility strengthen this stage of influence. Recognizing contributions from others prevents ego from isolating relationships. Humility invites open dialogue and continuous learning. People feel respected rather than dominated, strengthening cooperation. A humble presence does not reduce authority, it humanizes it. Respect grows when leadership feels relatable rather than distant. Emotional generosity becomes another defining trait. Offering understanding during mistakes, acknowledging effort, and expressing appreciation nurture loyalty. These gestures cost little but create strong emotional bonds. People naturally support those who make them feel valued. Emotional generosity transforms professional connections into meaningful alliances. At the same time, boundaries are expressed calmly and consistently. Others understand expectations without feeling attacked. Balanced firmness preserves respect while maintaining harmony. Silence regains importance at this level, but now it reflects wisdom rather than strategy alone. Silence allows reflection before judgment, observation before conclusion, and listening before response. It creates space for others to express themselves fully. This patience communicates confidence and emotional security. When words finally come, they carry greater significance because they are measured rather than impulsive. Presence itself becomes influential. Calm posture, attentive listening, steady eye contact, and measured speech signal stability. Stability reassures others during uncertainty. A composed presence can reduce tension in a room without explicit effort. People instinctively mirror emotional signals, and a calm individual often guides collective mood toward balance. Eventually, influence reaches a point where effort becomes minimal. Respect is offered naturally. Advice is sought willingly. Leadership emerges organically in moments of uncertainty. Authority no longer depends on titles or formal recognition. It is granted through collective trust developed over time. At this depth, psychological power aligns with responsibility. Influence affects decisions, opportunities, and emotional climates. Using it ethically ensures that environments remain constructive rather than exploitative. Ethical influence seeks mutual benefit and long-term harmony rather than personal dominance. A final understanding settles in quietly. The strongest form of power is not loud control but quiet alignment between character, intention, and action. When behavior consistently reflects emotional balance, integrity, patience, and respect for others, influence becomes effortless. It flows through presence rather than pressure, through example rather than instruction. This is where psychological power completes its evolution. It begins as awareness of perception, grows through emotional discipline and social intelligence, strengthens through resilience and reputation, and ultimately matures into quiet authority rooted in self-mastery. What remains is not the need to control others, but the ability to guide environments calmly, responsibly, and with lasting impact. There is something quietly fascinating about how true influence often becomes most visible only after a person stops trying to prove anything. The need to impress fades, the urge to dominate conversations softens, and the constant desire for recognition slowly dissolves. What remains is a composed, grounded presence that feels steady in any environment. This steadiness draws people in naturally. It creates a sense of reliability that cannot be manufactured through techniques alone. At this level, psychological power feels less like a skill being used and more like a state of being that others instinctively trust. Much of this transformation comes from understanding the limits of control. Early pursuits of influence often revolve around managing situations tightly, persuading actively, and minimizing unpredictability. But over time, it becomes clear that excessive control creates tension. People resist feeling managed too closely. They value autonomy and the freedom to think independently. When influence becomes too forceful, it generates silent opposition even if compliance appears on the surface. Letting go of unnecessary control paradoxically strengthens authority. It signals confidence in both oneself and others. This confidence allows space for natural dynamics to unfold. Instead of directing every outcome, a wise presence observes carefully and intervenes only when necessary. This restraint prevents unnecessary friction and preserves energy for moments that truly matter. It also communicates trust in the capabilities of others, which often encourages them to perform more responsibly. When individuals feel trusted, they try to justify that trust through better performance and honest communication. A deeper awareness also develops regarding human imperfection. People are inconsistent, emotional, and occasionally irrational. Expecting constant logic from others leads to frustration. Mature psychological strength accepts these imperfections without becoming cynical. It recognizes that emotions influence decisions just as strongly as facts. By acknowledging emotional realities instead of resisting them, communication becomes more empathetic and effective. Empathy at this level is not emotional over-involvement but perceptive understanding. It allows a person to sense unspoken concerns, hidden stress, and silent motivations. This sensitivity strengthens relationships because others feel seen rather than approachability. At the same time, emotional independence remains intact. Understanding others does not require absorbing their emotional turbulence. A stable individual can acknowledge frustration, fear, or disagreement without being pulled into reactive cycles. This balance preserves clarity during emotionally charged interactions. While others may become overwhelmed, the emotionally independent person remains grounded, allowing rational solutions to emerge. Another refinement appears in the way success and failure are interpreted. Earlier stages of growth often attach identity strongly to outcomes. Success inflates confidence, while failure damages self-worth. But deeper psychological maturity separates identity from temporary results. Outcomes become feedback rather than personal definitions. This separation reduces fear of failure and prevents arrogance during success. Stability replaces emotional extremes, making decision-making more balanced. This balanced perspective strengthens long-term thinking. Short-term emotional reactions no longer dictate choices. Decisions are guided by sustainability, ethical considerations, and future consequences. Relationships are valued over momentary victories. Reputation is protected over impulsive gratification. Patience becomes easier because there is less urgency to prove worth through immediate results. Silence becomes more meaningful as well. It is no longer used merely as a tactic but as a reflection of thoughtful presence. Listening without preparing immediate responses allows deeper understanding. Pauses create room for reflection and reduce misunderstandings caused by rushed speech. Silence also communicates comfort with oneself. Those who are not afraid of quiet moments often appear more confident than those who constantly fill space with words. Communication grows more intentional and concise. There is less need to over-explain or defend every position. Clear, measured expression signals certainty and reduces confusion. People tend to respect messages delivered with calm precision. Emotional intensity may attract attention briefly, but calm clarity sustains credibility. Humility continues to deepen influence in subtle ways. A humble presence does not compete for attention or dismiss others' contributions. Instead, it acknowledges shared effort and remains open to learning. This openness invites collaboration rather than rivalry. Others feel comfortable offering ideas, leading to richer discussions and stronger collective decisions. Gratitude also shapes perception powerfully. Expressing appreciation reinforces positive behavior and strengthens emotional bonds. People are more willing to support those who recognize their efforts sincerely. Gratitude shifts focus from entitlement to mutual respect, creating healthier and more cooperative environments. Over time, influence becomes closely tied to emotional atmosphere. A composed individual often sets the tone for entire groups. If they remain calm during difficulty, others feel reassured. If they react with panic or aggression, tension spreads quickly. Emotional steadiness therefore becomes a silent leadership tool that guides collective behavior without formal instruction. Personal discipline strengthens this atmosphere further. Consistent habits, punctuality, preparedness, and respectful conduct signal reliability. These behaviors may seem ordinary, yet their consistency builds powerful psychological impressions. Reliability reduces uncertainty, and reduced uncertainty increases trust. As influence matures, there is also greater acceptance of solitude. Constant validation from social interaction becomes less necessary. Comfort with solitude allows reflection, emotional reset, and independent thinking. This independence prevents desperation for approval and strengthens authenticity. People who are comfortable alone often engage socially with greater confidence and sincerity. Eventually, a profound calmness settles into interactions. Urgency decreases. Conversations become more thoughtful. Decisions emerge from clarity rather than pressure. This calmness is not laziness or disengagement but controlled presence. It reflects a mind that is not easily shaken by external chaos. From this state, influence flows naturally. Others listen more attentively, conflicts resolve more smoothly, and cooperation develops with less effort. Authority no longer depends on assertion because credibility has already been established internally and externally. The journey of psychological power thus comes full circle. It begins with understanding perception, grows through emotional control and strategic awareness, deepens through resilience and ethical grounding, and ultimately settles into quiet presence guided by wisdom. One that shapes outcomes gently, earns respect naturally, and leaves lasting impact without ever demanding attention. There is a subtle but powerful realization that emerges when someone has spent years observing people, navigating conflicts, building relationships, and enduring both success and failure. It is the understanding that influence is not something you switch on when needed. It is something that surrounds you constantly, shaped by your habits, your emotional patterns, your values, and the way you make others feel in your presence. By the time a person reaches this stage of awareness, power no longer feels like a tool they hold. It feels like an atmosphere they carry. This atmosphere is sensed immediately by others, even if they cannot explain it clearly. Some individuals enter a room and create tension without speaking. Others bring a quiet sense of ease and stability. This effect is not accidental. Human beings are extremely sensitive to emotional signals. Tiny cues in posture, facial expression, voice tone, and pacing communicate internal states more loudly than words. A restless mind leaks through restless movements. An insecure heart reveals itself through hesitant speech. In contrast, a centered mind expresses itself through calm gestures and measured responses. When inner life becomes orderly, outer influence strengthens naturally. A person who has learned to sit with their own thoughts without discomfort develops a rare steadiness. They do not rush to escape silence. They do not fear pauses in conversation. They do not feel compelled to fill every moment with noise. This comfort with stillness sends a powerful signal of confidence. It shows that their sense of worth does not depend on constant attention or approval. Such steadiness changes how decisions are made. Instead of reacting emotionally to immediate events, thoughtful individuals allow situations to unfold before forming conclusions. They recognize that first impressions can be misleading and that emotional reactions often distort perspective. This patience prevents unnecessary mistakes and reduces conflict created by misunderstanding. Others begin to value their judgment because it appears balanced and fair. Fairness itself becomes a central pillar of lasting influence. People are highly responsive to perceived justice. When decisions appear biased or self-serving, trust erodes quickly. But when actions consistently reflect balanced consideration, even unfavorable outcomes are accepted with less resistance. Fairness signals that power will not be misused. It reassures others that influence is guided by principles rather than impulse. Consistency strengthens this reassurance. Unpredictable behavior creates psychological discomfort because people cannot prepare for changing moods or shifting standards. A consistently respectful and composed individual becomes easier to trust. Others know what to expect and feel safer engaging openly. This predictability reduces social tension and strengthens cooperation. Emotional maturity also reshapes how criticism is handled. Instead of interpreting disagreement as personal attack, mature individuals treat feedback as perspective. They listen without immediate defensiveness and evaluate criticism thoughtfully. This openness demonstrates security rather than weakness. People respect those who can consider opposing views calmly. It signals confidence strong enough to withstand scrutiny. Likewise, offering criticism becomes more refined. Harsh or public confrontation often triggers embarrassment and resistance. But gentle, private guidance preserves dignity while encouraging improvement. The goal shifts from proving others wrong to helping them grow. This supportive approach builds loyalty and reduces hidden resentment. Another deep shift occurs in the relationship with ambition. Early ambition often seeks status, recognition, and visible achievement. Mature ambition focuses more on meaningful contribution and long-term impact. Recognition becomes secondary to purpose. This change reduces competitive hostility and encourages collaborative success. People prefer working with those driven by shared progress rather than personal glory. Presence becomes more grounded as ego loosens its grip. Conversations feel lighter because there is less need to dominate or impress. Listening becomes genuine rather than strategic. Responses become thoughtful rather than rehearsed. This authenticity creates comfort, and comfort builds trust faster than performance ever could. Trust, once deepened to this level, transforms social dynamics. Others begin to share information more openly, seek advice more willingly, and cooperate with less hesitation. Influence flows through mutual respect rather than authority. Agreements feel like partners. Individuals choose peace not out of avoidance but out of strategic clarity. They understand that energy invested in negativity rarely produces meaningful returns. Preserving mental clarity becomes more valuable than winning every dispute. This clarity strengthens perception. Without emotional noise clouding judgment, subtle details become easier to notice. Changes in tone, hidden tension in conversations, and shifts in group dynamics become visible. This awareness allows timely intervention before problems escalate. Quiet prevention often proves more effective than dramatic correction. Restraint becomes a defining quality. Not every opinion needs expression. Not every mistake requires exposure. Choosing when not to act can be as powerful as decisive intervention. This selective engagement prevents unnecessary friction and preserves relational harmony. Forgiveness also becomes more natural. Holding resentment feels heavier than releasing it. Mature influence recognizes that minor offenses are often products of stress or misunderstanding rather than malice. Letting go prevents emotional buildup that could damage long-term relationships. Gratitude deepens as perspective widens. Achievements are seen not as isolated victories but as outcomes supported by many contributions and favorable circumstances. Expressing appreciation strengthens bonds and reduces ego-driven distance. People feel valued, and valued individuals cooperate more sincerely. Over time, authority transforms into quiet guidance. Others begin to mirror composed behavior, adopt balanced communication styles, and prioritize fairness in their own decisions. Influence spreads indirectly through example rather than instruction. Cultural norms shift subtly in environments shaped by consistent emotional intelligence. Eventually, psychological power settles into something remarkably simple: calm presence, clear intention, ethical consistency, and respectful treatment of others. No dramatic display is needed. Influence becomes embedded in daily behavior and long-term relationships. At this level, a person no longer chases power because they understand something deeper. The strongest influence is not taken, it is granted by others who recognize stability, integrity, and wisdom. Respect flows naturally toward those who handle responsibility with balance and treat others with dignity. And in this quiet exchange of trust and steadiness, influence reaches its most refined form, not as control over people, but as a steady force that guides decisions, strengthens relationships, and shapes environments with gentle but lasting impact. If you watch carefully, you will notice that the people who hold the deepest influence rarely appear obsessed with power itself. They are not constantly proving their authority, reminding others of their status, or forcing their opinions into every discussion. Instead, their strength feels quiet, almost understated. They speak when necessary, listen with attention, and move through situations with a calm sense of certainty. Others naturally adjust around them, not out of fear, but out of respect. This is the final refinement of psychological power, the stage where influence becomes inseparable from character. At this point, inner stability becomes the foundation of all external impact. A stable mind does not swing wildly with praise or criticism. Compliments are received with gratitude but do not inflate ego. Criticism is examined calmly without triggering defensiveness. This emotional balance prevents others from easily manipulating reactions. When people realize that neither flattery nor hostility can control you, they begin to treat you with greater sincerity. Such stability also changes the pace of life. Decisions are no longer rushed by anxiety or delayed by fear. There is a natural rhythm to thought and action. Important choices are given time to mature, while small matters are handled without unnecessary drama. This measured pace creates an impression of quiet confidence. It signals that you are guided by clarity rather than pressure. Clarity of mind strengthens clarity of communication. Words become more precise because they are not clouded by emotional noise. Explanations become simpler because there is no need to impress. A calm voice carries more weight than raised volume ever could. People listen more carefully when speech is thoughtful and deliberate. This style of communication reduces misunderstanding and builds credibility over time. Another transformation occurs in how relationships are valued. Instead of seeing people as tools for personal advancement, mature influence recognizes relationships as ecosystems built on mutual respect. Trust is treated as something precious rather than convenient. Commitments are honored carefully, meaningful than competition. The desire to dominate fades, replaced by a preference for shared progress. Success feels more satisfying when it benefits many rather than elevating one at the expense of others. This collaborative mindset reduces hostility and builds strong alliances. People are naturally drawn to those who create environments of fairness and shared opportunity. Emotional intelligence continues to deepen in subtle ways. Recognizing tension in a conversation before it escalates, sensing hesitation behind confident words, and understanding concerns that remain unspoken become almost intuitive abilities. These insights allow gentle adjustments in tone and approach that prevent conflict before it surfaces. Influence operates quietly through anticipation rather than reaction. There is also greater acceptance of human complexity. People are no longer judged too quickly for mistakes or inconsistencies. Instead, behavior is understood within broader emotional and situational contexts. This understanding fosters patience. Patience reduces unnecessary confrontation and allows room for growth. When others feel given space rather than pressure, they respond with greater openness. Self-awareness becomes sharper as well. Subtle emotional shifts are noticed early, preventing impulsive reactions. Fatigue is recognized before it becomes irritability. Stress is managed before it turns into harsh communication. This constant internal observation preserves composure and prevents damage to relationships. Boundaries remain firm yet respectful. Saying no no longer feels uncomfortable because self-respect outweighs the need for approval. Limits are expressed calmly without aggression. This balanced firmness prevents exploitation while maintaining mutual respect. Others learn to value time and energy that are clearly protected. A quiet sense of gratitude also becomes part of daily presence. Appreciation for small contributions, simple cooperation, and ordinary moments creates warmth in interactions. Gratitude softens authority without weakening it. It reminds others that influence does not erase humility. Over time, the need to control outcomes loosens further. Effort is focused on intention and integrity rather than rigid expectations. When outcomes differ from plans, adaptation replaces frustration. This flexibility preserves emotional balance and encourages creative problem-solving. Reputation at this stage feels less like an image to maintain and more like a reflection of lived values. There is little gap between public behavior and private character. Authenticity reduces the stress of performance and strengthens trust. People sense when behavior is genuine, and genuine presence fosters deeper respect. Leadership becomes an act of service rather than dominance. Guidance is offered with care. Decisions consider collective well-being. Authority is exercised with fairness and restraint. This service-oriented approach inspires loyalty that force can never achieve. Silence regains significance in a new way. It is no longer strategic or protective but thoughtful and observant. Quiet reflection precedes important decisions. Listening becomes more valuable than speaking. This patience creates space for wiser responses and deeper understanding. As ego softens, learning continues without resistance. New perspectives are welcomed. Mistakes are acknowledged without shame. Growth becomes a lifelong process rather than a temporary phase. This openness keeps influence relevant across changing environments. Eventually, psychological power becomes almost indistinguishable from simple human decency practiced consistently. Calm speech, respectful listening, ethical action, emotional balance, and genuine care for others combine into a presence that naturally commands respect. Nothing feels forced. Nothing feels artificial. And that is where the journey of influence truly settles. Power is no longer about controlling conversations, winning conflicts, or proving superiority. It becomes the ability to remain steady in uncertainty, kind without weakness, confident without arrogance, and firm without hostility. In the end, the most powerful individuals are those whose presence brings clarity instead of confusion, reassurance instead of tension, and cooperation instead of resistance. Their influence lasts because it is rooted not in tactics, but in character shaped patiently over time. This is the quiet peak of psychological power, a state where who you are speaks so clearly that you no longer need to prove anything at all. There is a peaceful strength that appears when a person no longer feels the need to rush their journey, defend their worth, or compete for every small advantage. Life begins to feel less like a battlefield and fades, replaced by quiet assurance in one's own values, decisions, and direction. Influence becomes gentle but firm, subtle but unmistakable. This calm confidence grows from deep self-trust. When individuals trust their judgment, they do not depend heavily on constant reassurance from others. They listen to advice, but final decisions come from inner clarity. This balance prevents confusion created by too many external opinions. It allows a person to stand steady even when surrounded by disagreement. Self-trust reduces hesitation and communicates certainty without arrogance. Certainty, when expressed softly, feels reassuring rather than intimidating. People are drawn to those who appear grounded in their choices because it creates a sense of stability. In uncertain environments, stability becomes a form of leadership. Others feel safer when someone nearby remains composed and decisive. Calm certainty spreads confidence through groups without dramatic instruction. Emotional independence continues to deepen here. Praise no longer creates overexcitement, and criticism no longer causes emotional collapse. Reactions become measured, thoughtful, and proportionate to the situation. This emotional balance prevents manipulation through approval or disapproval. It frees decision-making from the emotional influence of others' moods. With emotional independence comes freedom from comparison. Constant comparison drains energy and creates unnecessary insecurity or pride. Mature influence recognizes that every individual moves at a different pace with different strengths and limitations. Instead of competing constantly, focus shifts toward personal progress and meaningful contribution. This mindset reduces jealousy and fosters respect for others' achievements. Respect becomes more genuine when it is not forced by hierarchy. Treating people with dignity regardless of their position creates environments of trust. Small gestures of courtesy, attentive listening, and fair treatment communicate that power will not be abused. People respond positively to fairness because it protects their sense of worth. When dignity is preserved, cooperation becomes voluntary rather than pressured. Listening evolves into a deeper skill. It is no longer simply waiting for one's turn to speak. It becomes active presence, where attention is fully invested in understanding the other person's perspective. This level of listening reveals emotions beneath words and intentions behind expressions. People feel valued when they are heard sincerely, and this emotional validation strengthens bonds of trust. Patience also matures into quiet wisdom. There is less urgency to interrupt, argue, or correct immediately. Allowing conversations to unfold naturally often reveals more than rushed responses ever could. Patience prevents unnecessary misunderstandings and reduces emotional escalation. It signals confidence strong enough to wait for the right moment. At this level, reactions become increasingly intentional. Instead of responding automatically to every stimulus, thoughtful individuals choose responses aligned with their principles. This pause between event and reaction protects emotional balance. It allows reason to guide behavior rather than impulse. Simplicity begins to replace unnecessary complexity. Communication becomes clearer, decisions become more direct, and intentions become transparent. Simplicity reduces confusion and builds credibility. People trust those who express themselves plainly without hidden agendas or exaggerated language. Gratitude deepens appreciation for collaboration and shared effort. Recognizing others' contributions fosters loyalty and mutual respect. Gratitude transforms authority into partnership and reduces emotional distance between individuals. When appreciation is expressed sincerely, relationships strengthen naturally. Humility remains central to lasting influence. Admitting limitations, accepting mistakes, and remaining open to learning create authenticity. Authenticity builds trust because it shows honesty without defensive pride. People respect leaders who remain human rather than pretending perfection. Another subtle transformation involves energy management. Mature individuals become selective about where they invest emotional and mental effort. They avoid unnecessary drama and disengage from conflicts driven purely by ego. Conserving energy allows focus on meaningful priorities and prevents emotional exhaustion. Silence gains renewed value as a space for reflection. Quiet moments allow thoughts to settle and insights to emerge. Reflection strengthens clarity and prevents careless decisions. Those comfortable with silence appear composed and thoughtful rather than uncertain. As distractions lose influence, presence becomes strong. Trust those who give their full attention rather than scattered focus. Influence now feels less like persuasion and more like alignment. Others cooperate because values resonate, not because pressure is applied. Shared understanding replaces forceful convincing. Alignment builds harmony and long-term stability. Over time, the difference between personal life and professional presence begins to fade. Integrity remains consistent across environments. Behavior does not shift dramatically based on audience. This consistency reinforces trust and strengthens reputation. There is also a growing comfort with uncertainty. Instead of fearing the unknown, mature influence accepts unpredictability as natural. Flexibility replaces rigid expectation. Adaptation becomes smoother because emotional resistance is lower. Eventually, psychological power settles into a state of quiet leadership. Guidance is offered without controlling. Support is given without seeking credit. Authority is expressed without intimidation. Respect is earned without demanding attention. This final stage feels peaceful rather than intense. Influence operates through steady character rather than strategic effort. Interactions become smoother because emotional friction is minimal. Relationships deepen because trust is genuine. In this calm maturity, power is no longer something to chase or defend. It becomes a natural reflection of balanced thinking, emotional steadiness, ethical conduct, and respectful treatment of others. And when influence reaches this peaceful form, it creates a lasting presence that continues shaping environments gently, long after words are spoken and actions are completed. At a certain point in life, influence stops feeling like something external that must be acquired and starts feeling like a quiet extension of inner order. The noise of constant striving fades. The urge to prove superiority loses its grip. What remains is a composed way of being that speaks through actions more than words. A person who reaches this stage does not walk into rooms seeking attention, yet attention naturally shifts toward them. Their calmness feels reassuring, their words feel measured, and their presence feels steady in a way that comforts others during uncertainty. This steady presence comes from a mind that is no longer at war with itself. Inner conflicts, insecurities, and emotional turbulence gradually lose intensity as self-understanding deepens. When individuals become honest about their strengths and limitations, they stop pretending. Without the burden of performance, behavior becomes more natural and relaxed. Others sense this authenticity immediately. Authenticity builds trust because it removes the tension created by hidden motives and artificial behavior. With authenticity comes a softer relationship with ego. Ego once demanded recognition, control, and constant validation. But now it becomes quieter, allowing humility to guide interactions. Humility does not reduce confidence, it refines it. A humble person can acknowledge success without arrogance and accept mistakes without shame. This emotional balance creates approachability, making others feel comfortable sharing ideas and concerns openly. Openness transforms conversations into genuine exchanges rather than competitions. There is less interest in winning arguments and more interest in understanding perspectives. Disagreements are handled with respect instead of hostility. This respectful engagement reduces emotional friction and encourages cooperation even among differing viewpoints. As defensiveness fades, learning accelerates. Feedback is no longer perceived as a threat but as valuable information. Constructive criticism becomes an opportunity for refinement rather than a blow to pride. This openness to improvement strengthens both competence and credibility. Another subtle change appears in how time is experienced. Urgency decreases. Decisions are made thoughtfully rather than hurriedly. Patience allows events to unfold before conclusions are drawn. This slower pace reduces mistakes caused by emotional impulse and builds a reputation for careful judgment. Calm decision-making reassures others. People feel safer when guided by someone who does not panic under pressure. Emotional steadiness acts like an anchor in turbulent situations, preventing group anxiety from escalating. The ability to remain composed during difficulty becomes a silent form of leadership. Trust deepens further when intentions remain transparent. There is no need for manipulation or hidden agendas. Clear motives reduce suspicion and encourage honest communication. People cooperate more willingly when they believe actions are balanced. Judgment strengthens loyalty because people feel protected from bias. Even difficult choices are accepted when they appear just. Gratitude quietly enriches relationships. Acknowledging contributions fosters goodwill and strengthens emotional bonds. Appreciation reminds others that their efforts matter, encouraging continued cooperation and mutual respect. Emotional regulation becomes almost effortless. Anger no longer erupts quickly, and frustration no longer lingers unnecessarily. Emotions are acknowledged but processed calmly. This stability prevents small conflicts from becoming major disruptions. Simplicity shapes communication. Messages are delivered clearly without exaggeration or hidden meaning. Simple expression builds credibility because it reflects clarity of thought. People trust those who speak plainly and honestly. Listening deepens into genuine presence. Attention is fully given without distraction or impatience. Being heard satisfies a fundamental human need for recognition and respect. This attentive presence strengthens trust more than persuasive language alone. Silence becomes a source of insight rather than discomfort. Quiet reflection allows deeper understanding and more thoughtful responses. Comfort with silence signals confidence and emotional security. Personal discipline strengthens reliability. Consistent behavior, punctuality, and responsibility create predictability that others appreciate. Predictability reduces uncertainty and builds confidence in shared efforts. Boundaries remain firm yet kind. Protecting personal energy prevents exhaustion and preserves effectiveness. Clear limits encourage mutual respect and prevent misunderstanding. Forgiveness becomes easier as perspective widens. Minor offenses are recognized as human imperfection rather than intentional harm. Releasing resentment prevents emotional heaviness and allows relationships to heal. Compassion expands beyond immediate circles. Understanding others' struggles fosters patience and reduces harsh judgment. Compassion softens authority without weakening it. Gradually, influence transforms into quiet guidance. Advice is offered gently. Support is provided without seeking recognition. Leadership feels natural rather than imposed. Presence alone begins to communicate reassurance. Calm posture, steady tone, and attentive listening create emotional safety in groups. This safety encourages openness and cooperation. At this final stage, psychological power no longer relies on strategy. It flows from integrity, emotional balance, humility, patience, and consistent respect for others. Influence becomes effortless because it is rooted in character rather than tactics. Power is no longer about control or persuasion. It becomes the ability to create environments where people feel valued, heard, and respected. Such environments inspire natural cooperation and lasting trust. In the end, the strongest influence is gentle yet firm, quiet yet unmistakable. It does not demand attention but earns it. It does not force respect but receives it willingly. And in that quiet, steady way of being, psychological power reaches its most complete expression, not as dominance over others, but as harmony within oneself that naturally extends outward into every relationship and every environment. When influence reaches its most refined state, life begins to feel less like a series of battles to be won and more like a landscape to be understood. There is a quiet awareness that every interaction carries emotional weight, that every word leaves an impression, and that the way one moves through the world subtly shapes the experiences of others. At this level, power is no longer something dramatic or visible. It becomes gentle guidance, steady presence, and thoughtful participation in the flow of human relationships. A person who arrives here no longer seeks to control conversations or dominate decisions. Instead, they focus on clarity, fairness, and mutual understanding. They recognize that forcing outcomes often creates hidden resistance, while patient guidance encourages genuine cooperation. This shift from force to flow makes interactions smoother and more productive. Others feel respected rather than managed, which strengthens trust naturally. Trust at this stage feels deep and unforced. It grows from consistent honesty, emotional balance, and dependable behavior over time. There is no need to convince others of reliability because actions have already demonstrated it repeatedly. People feel safe sharing ideas, concerns, and responsibilities because they do not fear judgment or manipulation. Safety becomes the foundation of collaboration. Emotional balance continues to anchor this influence. Feelings are experienced fully, balanced expression reassures others and prevents emotional extremes from disturbing relationships. There is also greater comfort with imperfection. Perfection is no longer demanded from oneself or others. Mistakes are seen as natural parts of learning rather than signs of failure. This understanding creates room for growth without shame. When people feel accepted despite flaws, they become more open and cooperative. Communication grows softer but more meaningful. There is less need for dramatic expression or excessive explanation. Words are chosen carefully, spoken calmly, and guided by intention rather than impulse. Tone carries respect. Pauses allow reflection. Conversations become exchanges of understanding rather than competitions for dominance. Listening becomes a form of quiet generosity. Giving full attention without interruption communicates respect more deeply than persuasive speech. People feel valued when their voices are heard sincerely. This sense of being heard satisfies an emotional need that many carry silently, and it builds loyalty that cannot be created through authority alone. When someone listens with patience and genuine interest, barriers soften. Conversations become warmer, more honest, and more meaningful. Patience now feels natural rather than forced. There is no rush to interrupt, correct, or impose opinions. Time is allowed to do its quiet work. Situations are observed from multiple angles before conclusions are drawn. This thoughtful pace prevents misunderstandings and reduces unnecessary conflict. Others begin to rely on such calm judgment, especially in moments of uncertainty when emotions run high. With this patience comes a deeper sense of timing. Knowing when to speak and when to remain silent becomes intuitive. Words offered at the right moment can comfort, clarify, or guide without creating resistance. Silence at the right moment can prevent escalation, allowing emotions to settle naturally. This sensitivity to timing reflects emotional intelligence that cannot be faked. Humility continues to soften interactions. There is no desire to appear superior or more knowledgeable than others. Achievements are carried lightly. Credit is shared easily. This humility makes success feel inclusive rather than competitive. People feel inspired rather than overshadowed, and cooperation becomes more genuine. Respect flows in all directions, not just upward or toward authority. Every individual is treated with consideration regardless of role or status. This consistent respect creates environments where people feel safe contributing ideas and expressing concerns. When dignity is preserved, communication becomes more honest and productive. Self-awareness remains active and gentle. Emotional shifts are noticed early and managed quietly. Stress is addressed before it affects behavior. Fatigue is recognized before it turns into irritability. This internal attentiveness prevents negative emotions from spilling into interactions and damaging relationships. Gratitude deepens appreciation for life's shared efforts. Simple gestures of support, cooperation, and kindness are acknowledged openly. Appreciation strengthens emotional bonds and encourages continued goodwill. People naturally gravitate toward those who recognize their contributions sincerely. Boundaries are expressed calmly without guilt. Protecting time and energy is understood as necessary for maintaining balance. Saying no is done with politeness and clarity, without harshness or apology. This balanced firmness prevents resentment and maintains mutual respect. Forgiveness becomes easier as perspective widens. Small offenses lose importance when viewed within the larger picture of human imperfection. Letting go of resentment feels lighter than carrying emotional weight. Forgiveness restores harmony and keeps relationships resilient. Compassion grows beyond immediate benefit. Understanding replaces judgment. Others' struggles are seen with empathy rather than criticism. Compassion creates emotional warmth that strengthens connections and reduces hostility. Influence now flows quietly through example rather than instruction. Calm behavior encourages calm responses. Respectful communication inspires similar courtesy. Ethical decisions promote fairness in group dynamics. Without direct effort, personal conduct shapes collective culture. Leadership feels like service rather than control. Guidance is offered gently. Support is given freely. Decisions consider the well-being of all involved. Authority becomes protective rather than dominating. Presence alone begins to reassure others. A steady voice, relaxed posture, and attentive expression create emotional stability in shared spaces. This stability spreads quietly, calming tension and encouraging cooperation. Respect is offered freely because it feels deserved rather than demanded. At this depth, psychological power is inseparable from character. There is no need for performance or strategic display. Integrity, emotional balance, patience, humility, and kindness work together effortlessly. Life becomes less about controlling outcomes and more about guiding direction with wisdom. Relationships grow stronger because they are built on trust rather than advantage. Environments feel lighter because emotional friction is minimal. And in this gentle, steady way of living, influence reaches its quiet completion, a form of power rooted not in dominance, but in calm presence, genuine care, and the consistent practice of human decency. By the time influence reaches this depth, something very subtle yet very powerful changes inside a person. The constant mental noise that once demanded attention begins to quiet down. The urge to react instantly fades. The need to prove a point in every disagreement softens. A person starts moving through life with a calmer internal rhythm, almost like a steady current flowing beneath the surface. This inner stillness becomes the true source of psychological power. From this stillness comes clarity. When the mind is not crowded by ego, fear, or emotional turbulence, situations are seen more accurately. Intentions become easier to read. Hidden tensions become more visible. Decisions are no longer clouded by personal bias or impulsive feelings. A clear mind responds wisely instead of reacting emotionally. This difference may appear small from the outside, but it changes outcomes in profound ways. Clarity also transforms communication. Words are no longer used as weapons to dominate conversations or defend fragile pride. Instead, they become tools for understanding and cooperation. Speech slows down. Tone softens. Meaning becomes more important than volume. People feel less attacked and more respected, even during disagreements. Respect opens doors that force never can. At this stage, emotional control is no longer a technique being practiced. It becomes natural. Anger may still arise, but it passes like a brief cloud instead of becoming a storm. Fear appears as a signal for caution, not a command to panic. Disappointment becomes a lesson instead of a burden. Emotions are experienced fully but carried lightly. Because emotions are balanced, relationships become smoother. Conflicts that once escalated quickly now dissolve through calm discussion. Misunderstandings are clarified with patience. Differences of opinion are handled with maturity. This does not eliminate disagreement, but it removes unnecessary hostility. Hostility often comes from wounded pride, and pride gradually loosens its grip here. There is less desire to appear superior and more willingness to appear sincere. Admitting uncertainty no longer feels like weakness. Saying, "I was wrong," no longer damages identity. In fact, honesty strengthens credibility because it signals authenticity. Authenticity becomes effortless when there is nothing to hide. A person behaves similarly in public and private because values remain consistent. This consistency builds deep trust. People feel safe because they do not sense manipulation or hidden motives. Predictability in character creates emotional security in relationships. Security allows others to relax. When people are not busy protecting themselves from judgment or aggression, they communicate more openly. Ideas flow more freely. Cooperation becomes natural. A calm presence often has this effect without saying much at all. Another gentle shift occurs in how success is viewed. Success is no longer measured only by visible achievements or status symbols. It becomes connected to peace of mind, quality of relationships, and meaningful contribution. External rewards still matter, but they no longer define self-worth. This shift reduces comparison with others. Envy fades because self-value is not measured against someone else's path. Respect replaces rivalry. One person's success becomes inspiration rather than threat. As comparison fades, generosity grows. Sharing knowledge, opportunities, and credit feels natural rather than strategic. Helping others succeed does not feel like personal loss. In fact, collective growth feels more satisfying than individual recognition. Time also feels different. There is less rush to reach milestones and more appreciation for steady progress. Patience becomes easier because self-worth is not tied to speed. Thoughtful effort replaces anxious urgency. This patience improves judgment. Decisions are made after careful observation rather than emotional impulse. Long-term consequences are considered. Short-term temptations lose their power. Listening deepens further. Are heard without interruption. Silence becomes comfortable, even meaningful. Quiet moments allow reflection and insight. A person who is at ease with silence appears confident and emotionally secure. Personal discipline strengthens naturally. Healthy routines, responsible behavior, and consistent effort become expressions of self-respect rather than forced obligations. Discipline supports stability, and stability reinforces trust. Gratitude continues to soften interactions. Acknowledging others' efforts nurtures goodwill. Appreciation strengthens relationships quietly but powerfully. Boundaries remain clear yet gentle. Protecting energy and time prevents emotional exhaustion. Respect for personal limits encourages others to respect them as well. Forgiveness becomes a form of emotional freedom. Releasing resentment removes unnecessary mental weight. Peace becomes more valuable than holding onto anger. Compassion expands perspective. Understanding others' struggles encourages patience and kindness. Authority becomes more humane. Presence now communicates more than words. A calm face, relaxed posture, and steady tone signal reassurance. Emotional steadiness influences group mood without deliberate effort. Influence at this level is quiet but deeply rooted. It does not rely on persuasion techniques or visible dominance. It flows from integrity, emotional maturity, clarity of thought, and respectful behavior. Power becomes gentle guidance rather than forceful control. Leadership becomes supportive rather than commanding. Respect becomes mutual rather than demanded. And in this quiet refinement of character, psychological power reaches a state of harmony, where inner peace shapes outer influence, and a steady presence leaves lasting impact without needing to claim it. There comes a moment when influence feels so natural that it almost disappears from conscious awareness. A person is no longer thinking about how to appear confident, how to persuade effectively, or how to manage every impression. Instead, they simply move through situations with a steady mind and an open heart. Their presence feels grounded, their responses feel thoughtful, and their behavior reflects quiet self-respect. This is the stage where psychological power stops being something practiced and becomes something lived. At this depth, self-acceptance becomes the foundation of stability. A person no longer fights their own nature or hides their imperfections behind carefully crafted images. Strengths are appreciated without pride, and weaknesses are acknowledged without shame. This honest relationship with oneself removes the tension of pretending. Without internal resistance, external behavior becomes smoother and more genuine. Others sense this ease and respond with comfort and trust. Because there is nothing to prove, conversations become lighter. There is less urge to dominate discussions or correct every differing opinion. Listening becomes effortless. Curiosity replaces defensiveness. Dialogue turns into shared exploration rather than silent competition. When people feel they are not being judged or challenged unnecessarily, they open up more freely. Emotional steadiness continues to guide interactions. Feelings still arise, but they do not overpower judgment. Frustration is expressed calmly instead of erupting suddenly. Disappointment is processed quietly without spreading negativity. Joy is shared warmly without overwhelming others. This balanced expression makes relationships feel safe and predictable. Predictability in character creates reliability. Others know what to expect because reactions are not extreme or inconsistent. Reliability builds confidence, and confidence strengthens cooperation. People prefer working with those who remain composed rather than those whose moods shift unpredictably. Respect becomes a natural habit rather than a strategic choice. Every interaction, whether casual or formal, carries politeness and consideration. Differences in status or opinion do not change the tone of communication. Treating everyone with dignity fosters an atmosphere of equality and trust. This respectful approach reduces unnecessary conflict. Many arguments begin not because of real disagreement but because of harsh tone or wounded pride. Calm speech and patient listening remove emotional triggers that often escalate situations. Problems are addressed directly without damaging relationships. Humility deepens even further. Success no longer needs announcement, and recognition no longer fuels identity. Contributions are made quietly, with satisfaction coming from meaningful impact rather than public praise. Humility makes achievements feel inclusive rather than competitive. With ego softened, collaboration becomes smoother. Ideas are mutual support. Gratitude remains a quiet strength. Acknowledging others' efforts nurtures goodwill and reinforces positive behavior. Appreciation expressed sincerely strengthens bonds and encourages continued cooperation. Boundaries are maintained without emotional strain. Saying no is done gently but firmly. Protecting time and energy becomes a form of self-respect rather than selfishness. Healthy limits prevent burnout and preserve emotional balance. Patience becomes a defining trait. Rushed decisions and impulsive reactions are replaced by thoughtful consideration. Time is allowed for emotions to settle and facts to emerge. This deliberate pace prevents regret and improves outcomes. Clarity guides communication. Words are chosen carefully, spoken calmly, and supported by genuine intention. Clear communication prevents misunderstanding and builds credibility. Simplicity replaces unnecessary complexity. Listening becomes deeper than ever. Attention is given fully, without distraction or hidden agenda. Being truly heard satisfies a deep emotional need and strengthens trust more than persuasive language. Silence becomes meaningful rather than awkward. Quiet moments allow reflection and emotional reset. Comfort with silence signals inner peace and confidence. Self-discipline remains steady. Responsibilities are fulfilled consistently. Commitments are honored reliably. Discipline supports trustworthiness and long-term credibility. Forgiveness flows more easily. Resentment feels heavy and unnecessary. Letting go brings emotional freedom and preserves harmony in relationships. Compassion expands naturally. Understanding others' struggles encourages patience and kindness. Authority becomes gentler and more humane. Presence alone begins to influence environments. Calm posture, attentive expression, and measured speech create emotional reassurance. Stability spreads quietly through social spaces. Influence now operates without force. Others seek guidance voluntarily, listen attentively, and cooperate willingly. Respect is given freely because character demonstrates integrity. Leadership becomes quiet service. Support is offered without seeking recognition. Decisions consider collective well-being. Authority feels protective rather than controlling. At this final maturity, psychological power becomes indistinguishable from simple human decency practiced consistently. There is no dramatic display, no strategic performance, no need for validation. Influence flows naturally from balanced character. Power is no longer about shaping others' behavior directly. It becomes the ability to create environments where trust grows, cooperation feels natural, and relationships remain strong. And in this calm and grounded way of living, influence reaches its most peaceful form, a quiet strength rooted in authenticity, emotional balance, humility, and steady respect for the human experience.